right. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to meet here with us. And, Ken and I are going to go through this presentation and hopefully we'll get you thinking about this and you'll have some great questions for us at the end of this. Ken, did you want to say anything?
Well, I'll just, want to introduce, I don't know if you have anything planned for introductions, but my name's Ken Setkun. I'm owner of North Star Technology Group, and I'm excited to talk to you guys a little bit about why everybody needs a cybersecurity risk assessment.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm Dan DeFay. I actually the former owner of Smart Firm IT. But luckily, I ran into Ken. We co-authored a book together, and we decided to join forces. And we're in the middle of merging our companies together right now.
I'm glad you are still happily, fondly looking back at this. So that's good, Simon.
Absolutely, absolutely. My background is with law firms. I used to work at the biggest law firm in Sacramento, California, a long time ago, and left there. And eventually, when I started my business in 2016, the majority of my customers were law firms and solo attorneys that were in the Northern California area. And it pretty much grew up through there, and we were able to grow nationwide. And so I'm just really excited about working with Ken and his team and making us all one big family to support more companies and law firms throughout the country. So yeah, I'm super happy. Looking forward to actually coming up to Fargo, North Dakota, and Minnesota in a couple weeks, and hopefully meeting some of you while I'm up there. So the reason that I hope you're here is that, you may have some thoughts or some questions about, security and how your firm can, keep itself safe in these kind of treacherous times that we're going through right now. As a law firm, I think the one thing that I constantly hear from most of my clients is that they really are concerned about keeping their clients' data safe. And that's really the big push behind making sure that, the cybersecurity protections that are in place are being looked after, and so what we really try to do, the very first step in making sure that you're secure, is having what we call a cybersecurity risk assessment. So even if you have an IT department, or you have somebody that does your IT, and you have cybersecurity insurance, you may be wondering if that's enough. And in our opinion, it's not. And so really the risk assessment, finding somebody that can do that for you, just, having somebody from the outside take a look and go through this process is very valuable, and we highly recommend it. So I know, especially if you're with a small law firm, you may think that you're too small and that hackers are never going to come after you, but that's actually the opposite. The bigger law firms, they have a staff of people that are involved in cybersecurity. They have larger budgets where they can actually buy the latest and greatest tools. So it's the smaller and mid-sized firms that really are susceptible to being hacked. And cyber criminals know that, and there's easy ways for them to get in and get a foothold. And really, once they're in, they're going after your client data. They know how important that is to you, and they're going to do everything they can to start copying it outside of your firm. And then once they've done that, they're going to go through all that data, and they're going to identify who all of your clients are and start attacking them as well. That's the trend that we're seeing now. So a lot of the problem is that most of you don't really understand what you can't see, right? So this slide that you're looking at right here, this is a this is just one of the things that we looked at on a small law firm that we did a risk assessment for in California. And you can see here, we were able to identify almost 6,000 failed login attempts for this firm just in the last 90 days. So in this case, the attacker actually has the correct email addresses of people that are in the law firm. They just don't have the correct password. And so every dot that you see on the map, that is a failed login for that user. And so, unless you have things in place to identify this, you're kind of in a blind spot running your law firm. One of the things that we also see is that there's really only two things that law firms have in place when they engage with us. There's usually antivirus, and there might be a firewall. And for a long time, going back to the year 2000, antivirus and firewall was pretty much the only defense that we had. It wasn't until about maybe 7 or 8 years ago that things evolved, and there were a lot more tools in place that we can use to protect, the law firms that we protect now. So if an antivirus and firewall is what you have, that's still necessary, but it's definitely not enough. And just to kind of give you a glimpse of what a modern cybersecurity system looks like, there's a whole list of things here that we put in place for our clients. And the main thing being the Security Operations Center, where there's 24/7, 365 eyes on glass looking at any anomalies or things that are going on. So that's the level of monitoring that we highly recommend you have. And if you don't already have this kind of system in place, you really do need a risk assessment, because there's probably so many things that are going on behind the scenes that you're not even aware of. So North Star, who I'm super happy to be joining with. We're a fairly larger IT company now. We have engineers all over the country, and we all work remotely. We started in Fargo, and I'll let Ken speak to some of this, since he represents the Midwest. Most of my clients are out on the West Coast, and other areas like New York, Florida, and places like that.
Yeah, no, I just to kind of, I guess, tack onto that. We started North Star a long time ago, and primarily focused on the healthcare IT and compliance space, which is a big part of our business still. And we like to pride ourselves in the fact that we use the same rigor that we apply to compliance regulated industries like healthcare or like government contractors to other industries. And one of the big reasons why I was so excited to join up with Dan and Smart Firm IT is his work in legal and working with law firms, and I'm excited to continue what we've been doing with the compliance over into law. So and as Dan mentioned, we are all over the country. We're primarily a remote workforce. It's kind of the way we've been operating, and this allows us, of course, to be able to recruit just the best and the brightest. And of the 27 cybersecurity and technical people, these are hand selected from all over the world, to be honest. So, and again, I'm excited, Dan, to work with you.
Yeah, same here, Ken. All right, so let's go over the agenda a little bit. So today we're going to go through what's involved with the risk assessment, why you need to really have one as soon as possible, and what the process and the timeline looks like, and basically the steps that you can take to increase your security and lower your risk. So why should you listen to us? Well, there's cyber attacks happening every single day Ken and I have both been involved in rescuing companies that have been ransomware or have had business email compromise, or you name it. Pretty much me and Ken have both experienced that and helped companies on the other side of that. And Ken can attest to this as well. It's so much better for you to put things in place to prevent that from ever happening than to just take your chances and try to not budget for this type of you know basically this type of technology that's now available. So we really do invest in protecting our clients first, and we really want to have the protection being the solid foundation. And then from there, once the protection and everything is laid out and there's a good foundation, then we really want to help you grow and automate and utilize technology to grow your business. But it just doesn't make sense to focus on growth and automation if you're not doing the basic essential things to keep your risk lowered. All right, so what is a risk assessment? Well, pretty much, we're going to find problems. Every risk assessment we've ever done, there's never been one where they got an A and there were no issues. But there's always going to be issues. But when you're looking at those issues, they really have to be prioritized. And what we try to do is, with the risk assessment, figure out what is critical. What are the critical things that we got to take care of first? Let's attack that. And then maybe there's things that are high but they're not critical, attack those next. And really figuring out what needs to be dealt with first. That's a big part of what the risk assessment does. The other thing that it does, if you haven't seen this already, most companies or customers that you may try to do business with, they're starting to now ask for proof that you're doing all these things. So when it comes to things like that, there's going to be regulations that you might fall under, such as HIPAA, FTC safeguards, or PCI DSS for credit cards. And so these companies that fall under those regulations, they're going to be asking you a lot of questions and sending you a lot of checklists to see if you're doing all these things. The other thing is, I can't really emphasize enough how expensive a breach is, and how important it is to really just prevent that from happening. So really, you got to focus on protecting your assets. You got to make sure that every single computer that touches client data, that it's being monitored, and that there's nothing bad going on, or it's not sending traffic to the wrong country. There's a lot of things like that we find during this. And so the other thing is, in addition to just the cost of a breach, the other thing that people don't understand is the downtime involved. There's never been a breach where there hasn't been downtime. I've never seen that happen. There's always, at least, I would say at a minimum, you're talking at least 3 or 4 days. Maybe you can't even get into your email. Maybe your email's been taken over, and bad links and things like that are coming from your email to your clients, and you can't even do anything about it. So you're not able to, communicate with your clients. You may have to call them and tell them, we just got breached and we're trying to mitigate it. Those are not phone calls that you're going to want to have. Ken, any other things I missed on that?
No, I mean, I completely agree. And even with some of the best protections in place, right, there are circumstances where there's downtime and outages. The key, of course, is how do you recover from those, and
Yeah.
how do you handle the necessary notifications, and how do you handle forensics. And so what we try to do when we do a cybersecurity risk assessment is understand kind of where your risk is, what your requirements are for your state, even on the information that you store and how you protect it and what you need to do if something bad happens. And regardless if you are subjected to regulatory compliance, you still may have customers or clients that are going to ask you, how are you handling your cyber risk? We just met with a company yesterday. They are a 100 employee executive placement firm, and they are getting constantly asked now, how are you handling cybersecurity risk, and can you demonstrate that you are taking the care of this stuff seriously? So it's becoming more and more important to be able to have your ducks in a row.
Yeah, and I've seen that constantly. A lot of my law firm clients are always telling me, hey, we're trying to get an account with this company and start helping them, but they've got all these things that we've got to prove. So if you haven't seen that yet, you probably will in the next year or two. So the framework of what the risk assessment is, we kind of break it down by people, process, technology, and data. And so we kind of go through and look at your team. We'll test your team. We'll send some phishing simulations and see who clicks on things. And I know everybody always likes to think that they'll never be tricked when it comes to clicking on something, but we have a very high rate of failure when we do this. When you're going through the day and you're going through emails, I know things get busy, especially in a law firm, and that DocuSign that you were waiting on, that might not have actually come from who you thought it came from. So you really have to do everything you can to train everybody that's in your firm not to click on the wrong things. The process, that's another thing that we look at. Are the things that need to be done for a secure IT environment being done? Are backups actually being verified? Is access being verified? Those are the kind of things that really let a bad guy into your environment and let them stay in there for a long time without being detected. The other thing is the technology. So all of the computers have so many different kinds of software on them, and every piece of software that's on the computer has to be updated. There's patches for that. There's patches for the computer itself. There's patches for the firewall. There's patches for the switches. There's patches for everything that pretty much is electronic and connected to the internet that's in your firm. So that really has to be managed and updated properly. And there's just, you'd be surprised, and usually law firms are surprised when we actually show them the results of the risk assessment, and they're like, oh, I didn't even know we had all those things on our network. So it's very eye-opening when we present those findings. And lastly, the data. One of the things that we see all too often is, a lot of lawyers, they like to work from their laptops. They'll be working from home, and we find that nothing is being encrypted. So if you have a laptop and you either have financial data or client data on it, if that laptop is stolen and you can't prove that it was encrypted, you have to notify all the clients that were affected from that. So there's a lot of things that you may not be aware of that really get brought to light when we do this process. So when we talk about protecting the people, the email is the most common way that most of the attacks actually get in. And so we actually support a law firm, and they're a family law firm in California. The opposing counsel actually did not have proper cybersecurity It was just a solo attorney and her assistant, and they didn't really have anything in place to monitor for events like this. And so basically, what happened is they were working on a case together. Um, the opposing counsel's firm, their email got compromised. Bad guy was in their email monitoring the correspondence that was going between them and the firm that we were helping. And basically, they tricked them. They figured out when their settlement was going to happen, and the law firm, the opposing counsel's law firm, didn't even know they were in there. And so they had emailed the other firm that we were supporting, and our security identified, that the email was coming from the wrong person. But unfortunately, the even though we had everything kind of lit up, and the warning signs were there, the paralegal that was in the middle of dealing with the payout basically was tricked, and she ended up wiring $90,000 to uh, basically the criminal, and the other thing that happened is the opposing counsel even received a fake check from the cyber criminal, so they thought they were getting paid, and the other firm thought that they were paying the right people, and they unfortunately didn't have protections for wire fraud in place too, which I'm going to touch on next. So so this was a case where, even if you're doing everything right, when you're in a law firm, you're dealing with a lot of different parties, and if one of those parties, you know doesn't have things in place, they can be a weak link, and really cause a lot of damage. So you want to make sure that you have everything in place to prove that you're doing things in a secure way. And I think there's another story you have on this one, Ken.
Yeah, so we helped a mortgage company that had gone through a process where one of their customers who was purchasing a home had fraudulent wire instructions sent to them. There was a process where they intercepted the legit wire instructions and sent fraudulent wire instructions to this person who ended up wiring, their entire down payment and closing costs, which was, into the six figures to the bad guy. And, ultimately, in this case, of course, some of the things that we check for as part of the security risk assessment is policy and process. How are things handled when it comes to, in this case, ACH and communicating instructions. But can you imagine, right? Like you're a young person and you're about to buy your first home and end up sending all of the money that you've been saving for, right, to the bad guy.
Yeah.
In this case, I think the FBI is, started to get involved, and there's other things that they were trying to do, but ultimately, this was a process failure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about protecting the technology. 60% of small businesses will close within 6 months of a breach. Luckily, a lot of the breaches that I've been involved with, we were actually able to recover, uh, in enough time that the company didn't lose its customers, and they were able to continue operating. But I think, Ken, you dealt with one that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, this story, we could literally do an entire webinar and case study just on this particular event. It's kind of remarkable. So we helped a regional cloud provider. They provide hosting services to very small, medium-sized businesses, data centers in Baltimore, Maryland, and Dallas, Texas. They had a security breach where the threat actor got in through an exposed remote access server at this this company's headquarters. And we talk a lot about dwell time, which is basically the time where a bad guy gets into an environment and they're there, right? And they're sitting and they're trying to figure out what they can see and what they can do. Well, in that process, I think it was about 60 to 90 days, they were able to explore the network and be able to traverse from the Baltimore data center to the Dallas, Texas data center where the backups were for this environment. They detonated ransomware and affected not only certain customers and the services that they were providing, but also the backups. Quickly kind of getting into this, they this organization that detonated the ransomware actually was using such a brand new flavor of ransomware that the FBI still did not have their subcommittee on this. We ended up having to work with a separate company that ended up negotiating for ransom payment on behalf of this customer. Imagine, right, a world that we live in where there is companies that their sole purpose is to negotiate ransom payments with ransomware gangs, right? It's right out in the movies. And just a quick note on this, I know some of you guys have cyber liability insurance, which you absolutely have to have. Many of you don't realize that many of the policies require you to front the ransom payments before getting reimbursed by insurance. So this cloud company actually had to pay the $140,000 ransom to these bad guys before insurance would reimburse them for that stuff. So, I can't tell you how I just don't want this stuff to happen to anybody else, right?
Yeah, and that brings up another good point. I was involved with a company that got hit with ransomware. We went in, we were actually able to recover them, but the only way we could recover them is to buy all new computers because they did not have the time to wait for a forensic investigation. So they had to buy all new computers, all new equipment, um, and they were still down for almost a week. And they had to buy all this with their own money, and then they had to file a claim with insurance to hopefully get paid back. So all of the money that you're going to be dealing with is going to be front loaded. And the moment you deal with a breach, your expenses are going to start skyrocketing and your income is going to start plummeting. And you better hope that your customers and clients don't get wind of it because they may stop paying you because they're afraid that something more is going to happen. So ransomware is still a really big thing. We actually have been helping another company recently that got hit, and I know Ken, you dealt with another company or another hospital that was hit. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So, again, the point of all this stuff is prevention is best, right? Ultimately, of course, the ability to recover if something happens, is right up there. But we're trying to keep, organizations safe before some of this stuff happens. There was a hospital up in the upper Midwest that had a ransomware detonation. They had 140 workstations, and they were actually hosting all of their electronic medical record systems on site. These guys had a vendor partner that they were working with that hosted their email, and then that email server actually had a connection into the private network. That email server through that vendor was compromised, and that's kind of how they got into the network. But the point I wanted to make with this one is even with full backups, and this organization had very good backups, but even with backups, there's still a very lengthy recovery process that has to happen. First of all, a forensics team wants to be able to get in there and figure out what happened, right? So, kind of cause of the issue, but it's also meant to be able to determine how far back the problem goes. So, even where and how far to even restore data from. That could take days. The recovery process in this case required re-imaging all of the workstations, required rebuilding all the servers. We had to send a team in, to do this just for timeliness sake. We ended up dealing with an IT director and a CEO that had COVID, a winter storm that prevented the recovery team from coming. It was just chaos, right? And so, my point is, even with backup, sometimes this stuff takes time. So we're trying to make sure that we don't get to the point where we even need to do this recovery.
Yeah, the company that I helped recover from a ransomware attack, they were in Alabama, only about 50 users, but their IT person that they had hired had a bigger client that got hit at the same time. And so he went to rescue them and kind of left these people hanging. But yeah, and even though they decided, hey, we're going to buy all new equipment and restore from backup, you know, at the time, this was also like right after COVID, you couldn't get a server for 3 or 4 months. So I had to go to a computer store and build a server, from parts basically just to get them back up and running. And they were down for a week, even though we were able to recover from backup. So a whole week they had, nothing that their people couldn't even show up to work and do anything. Um, so how long does this process take? So whenever we do a risk assessment for a company, it does depend on the size of the company, but I would say, for a law firm that's anywhere from like 1 to 10 people in it, we could have a turnaround on that within 2 or 3 weeks. If it's about maybe 10 to 50 people, we're probably looking at like 3 to 4 weeks. And if they're bigger, sometimes it can take up to 6 weeks. But it's a very thorough process. There's a lot of it involved. We actually simulate attacks on the current, environment with the current security services installed. So we'll actually go through and simulate what a real attack would look like in today's environment. And if they've got firewall and antivirus, it won't even get detected. We'll basically be able to do all these things, find all these problems, and they'll never even be alerted that, you know, there was anybody, trying to go in and do anything. So it's very important to keep that in mind. Antivirus and firewall are no longer effective. You got to have more. So the other thing, Ken and I both agree that cybersecurity insurance is super important to have. But like all things, it's not everything. The good thing about cybersecurity insurance is that it will reimburse you, hopefully, after the damage has been done. But now the cybersecurity insurance companies are, they're wising up, and they're actually, mandating that there's a lot of controls and checklists and things that have to be signed off on that you're doing. And the moment there's a breach, first of all, you're going to be paying out of pocket, and then they're only going to reimburse you after a forensic investigation has been performed. And if they find that one thing wasn't done that you said that you did, they're not going to pay the claim at all. So it's important to really have your security aligned with the policy. And the other thing that, now that there's been a lot more kind of world events with Hamas and Israel and with Russia and Ukraine, we're starting to see that sometimes the nation states are getting involved. The one of the recent ransomware attacks that we saw actually was from Hamas sympathizers. So they do sometimes have clauses that will say, hey, if this is shown to be an act of war, we're not going to pay the claim. So cybersecurity insurance is important, but again, you can't just rely on it by itself. All right, so where do you go from here? So you can try and piece all of this together. You can try and work with your internal IT department, or whoever is providing your IT, and try to make sense of all this. Or you can work with a partner that has done this time and time again, and can get this done in a very effective and short time period. The other main thing is you've got some calculations to do. You need to know what you're facing, what kind of financial disaster you could be in for if you don't have the right things in place. And so with the risk assessment, we're going to be able to identify that and give you some idea of what you need to budget for. to prevent this, hopefully, or what you need to budget for if you decide not to. So Ken, I'll let you speak on to this one. I know that, like, obviously we're merging companies together, but I know with SmartFirm, I designed our help desk and tech support to be very responsive, because I know the demands that attorneys are under. Um, Basically, the moment something's not working, they're not able to bill. So we do have 24/7, 365 support uh, that you can text, you can call, or you can email us, and we'll respond within a minute.
Time is money, right? So, and especially when you're talking and working with law firms. So, we want to make that same, commitment to the customers that we work with. From a support perspective, we have a team that is part of our help desk with the addition of SmartFirm IT that's allowed us now to move to staffed 24/7, 365. We have a robust team of escalation engineers, right, to help those with those issues that become more and more complicated. We have 3 CISSPs, which is a highly sought after cybersecurity certification. We have a sister company that is a registered practitioner organization for CMMC. We do cybersecurity, third-party risk assessments for compliance regulated industries all over the country. 30 plus states we do these for. We help manage and scan close to 20,000 endpoints every quarter for vulnerabilities. We've worked with organizations as small as a single person, single employee, up to 1,500. And we would love to be able to work with you guys and make sure that you are safe. We talk about protecting information and reputations. Ultimately that's our mission, is to protect your business reputation and your data.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ken. All right. So the next step, if you are interested in a cybersecurity risk assessment, the next step, you can just reach out to us and book a call. We'll have a cyber strategy session with you, and we'll start going over some of this stuff with you. You can also go to info.northstar-tg.com, and you can book your strategy session there as well. We currently have a handful of these already underway. So we probably have like 1 slot left for this month. But we always have this queue that we're kind of working through, and we do have probably 1 slot left for this month, but who knows where that's going to be in a couple weeks. We constantly get hit with people looking for this. So thank you all for joining. Do we have questions or?
Yeah, I'll open it up if there's anybody that has any question at all. First question is, how long does it take to perform a cybersecurity risk assessment? What's my commitment?
Yeah, so the cool thing there is, and again, it really depends on the size of your firm, but as far as the involvement of you in the process, your involvement is going to be about 30 minutes. We basically will work with you or the point of contact that we need to get access inside your network and on the computers. And once we get on one computer inside your network, we can pretty much take care of everything from there. So really, probably a minimum of 30 minutes. You can be as involved as you want to be. I mean, we will go through to see if you have any security policies in place or things like that. But really, it just depends. Some people have more things than others, right? And there's no wrong answer. The main thing is just taking the steps to get secure, and that's what we designed this for.
Next question. I'm a solo attorney. Is there a minimum charge for an assessment?
Uh, yeah, so for a solo attorney, the charge is 375. $375, not $3.75
For the assessment?
for the whole assessment. Yes,
Okay, that's a bargain.
it is.
We need to talk about that. The next question is, does an assessment obligate me to any other service?
No, it doesn't. The great thing is the assessment is a paid engagement, so we're basically going to give you a great presentation and go through all the findings with you, and you can take that and find somebody else to help you if you want, or decide to do nothing. From that point on, it's all it's your risk, so you get to decide how you want to manage it. We're just here to help you if you choose us.
Yeah, and I want to add a little bit to about the deliverable. We have we get a lot of requests from customers to help them fill out cyber liability insurance applications in renewals, right? And obviously the insurance companies are getting tired of being the banks for organizations and their cyber breaches and the costs associated with when these happen. And so we don't really talk about this, right? But the results of that cybersecurity risk assessment, it will kind of align with what we see as the most common requests and expectations of cyber insurance providers with the cybersecurity controls that organizations need to be able to have policies, bound, right? And claims to be reimbursed. But so there's no obligation for services, but I think there's a high amount of value, right, that you get for the small amount of money that you pay that can be used whether you work with us in the future or not. What happens, Dan? What happens if we find an active threat during an assessment, like potential ransomware? What do we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, everything really depends, right? So, with a ransomware, if it's an active ransomware, we're gonna notify you right away, and we're gonna basically go into incident response mode. So if an active ransomware is actually happening, we're gonna go ahead and take some quick actions to try to minimize the attack and limit it, and then come back to you with options on how you want to deal with that incident response. The full incident response is not covered with the fee, but we do have resources to help kick that into gear, and we'll go over with you what that additional pricing would be. But it's really good to do this, and our risk assessment process involves our SOC, our Security Operations Center. So we immediately put our agents on all the devices and monitor for anything that looks suspicious. So we consider like the risk assessment as a cyber sweep through your firm, just to make sure there's nothing suspicious going on. Because if you do want to engage us afterwards, we want to make sure there's nothing bad there before we take on the risk of supporting your firm.
One more. Does an assessment also go through incident response planning?
Yeah, so if you have an incident response plan, we'll review the plan. But incident response planning in and of itself would be something that we would offer as a service to you afterwards. And that would be an additional cost.
Yeah, essentially, the risk assessment will help identify, whether some of these things are in place. An incident response plan is critical, right? So the fact that you were asking this question is fantastic, right? Think about that, Dan. 3 years ago, would anybody be asking
Yeah.
stuff, right? But the process, of course, of assessing risk is to determine whether or not you are doing these things, and maybe how well, right?
Right.
Any other questions at all? Dan, I don't know if you can throw in the chat just your contact info, or is it on the screen?
Oh, it actually isn't. Let's see.
The info.northstartg.com will bring up a Calendly request that you can book a cybersecurity strategy session. Again, it's a completely free, no obligation conversation to talk through how much it makes sense, of course, to move forward with a risk assessment. But Dan put his email in the chat, dan.defay@northstar-tg.com. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any other questions, Dan. So as always, I appreciate you and your contribution. And again, if you guys are interested, or if anybody's interested in talking more about this, we look forward to having those conversations.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.